Hi, I'm Ryan Crone, Director at the Institute for Personalized Learning. I'd like to thank you for joining us here today on our Learner-Centered Design series, Tools for Transformation. The Institute for Personalized Learning is in its 8th year, and over the last 8 years we had an opportunity to work together and alongside some of the most amazing and courageous pioneers and leaders in educational transformation. Over that time, we've had a chance to become known for our honeycomb, as well as for our Institute Toolkit. The Toolkit is a collection of amazing tools and resources that have been developed over time along educators, along leaders, and along practitioners doing work in the field. Our Learner-Centered Design Series is an opportunity to take a deep dive into some of these tools. You get a chance to see not only what they are, but most importantly, the purpose behind them and how to use them in your school and school community. We're going to begin the presentation now, and as we go through this presentation, you always have the opportunity to pause this webinar as you're downloading resources, taking notes, or making initial connections. The goal of this webinar and this series is to be able to provide you with the supports to be able to lead some of these transformational efforts and to use some of these resources in your local context. Thank you. Our Learner-Centered Design series and this Tools for Transformation, today's episode is about uncovering assumptions. As you'll see in the lower left corner, you're able to download our free toolkit at the website and the web link provided. We'll be using that toolkit throughout this series, and specifically, we'll be using a couple of tools today and referencing them throughout the presentation. If you don't have access to download that right now during the presentation, this link will be available at all time, and you'll be able to utilize the resources that we'll have in our ongoing slides as we move forward. So let's begin. As you can see by our toolkit, the wording right here in terms of downloading it, you can see that we just last month in October had updated our toolkit. Updated annually as a part of we're on our 7th edition. The toolkit was designed to be used inside of a local context, depending on which stage you're at and the work that's unfolding. In response to frequently asked questions, professional development, and other processes that happen inside of school, we have taken the time to organize these tools into a series to help navigate the complex work of educational transformation. The Institute has used 6 stages to define the work of educational transformation. As you can see here, getting started and design, implementation and iteration, and expansion and systemic change. These are not only the 6 stages that we utilize when we're beginning the work and doing the work for educational transformation and moving to a personalized learning system, but these are also the terms that we've used inside of the toolkit to organize some of the tools and resources that we have. If you're looking at getting a group started, we have a collection, a series of tools to help with that. If you're looking at doing some design thinking, some design work, and to be able to start to craft out your model, we have a section in there. Today we'll be digging in closely at an introductory section, which will lead to beginning some of this work. I mentioned earlier that the selection of a tool from the toolkit requires us to think about our particular purpose. In this particular case, when the title of our session is Uncovering Assumptions, maybe you're looking to address traditional instructional approaches in your school. Maybe you're thinking about ways to think about increasing student commitment to the work, or develop a common understanding of the assumptions and beliefs and thinking that underlie current practice and future design. You may be in a position right now where you're thinking about helping educators retrain the brain and rethink what school should be. And lastly, you might be thinking about engaging your school community and addressing the status quo. Some of these questions are really about the particular purpose that a school may have. In many ways, the purpose needs to match the tool that we need to use. At the end of this webinar, you'll have a chance to think about some of your own local context, maybe some questions that you'd like to pose, and able to better match the use of your questions and your purpose to some of the tools and resources. The table of contents in our Institute toolkit, again, has a coding system for finding tools and resources. Today's episode around uncovering assumptions, we'll take a look and a deep dive at 2 activities in there, with a goal of simply being able to help familiarize you with the Institute Toolkit, and most importantly, being able to match some of the tools to the work that's unfolding inside of your school district. At this time, it'd be another good time to pause this video if you need to download any resources or to be able to find a link to this work. We're going to begin, and I'm not going to take you directly through the activities themselves, but I'm going to define the purpose behind them and how to go about using them. In this case, as you can see by the layout of the tool itself, this tool, which is 0.22 as coded in the table of contents, the activity is when there is a correct answer. As you can see, we've laid out how much time this might take. This is helpful when you're putting together maybe a staff meeting or have an opportunity for adding things into a professional development agenda. See what type of activity this is. This is going to be a reflective activity and a chance to engage in some thinking. This is an opportunity to think about your entire comprehensive team, which means this might work for a full staff meeting. And the difficulty of 1 to 5, this is just a starter project. It's not going to take you too deep into needing a lot of background knowledge, but it really is going to get the conversation started. And as you can see, this gets you thinking collectively, is there really a correct answer for how we're doing work in our school, in our classroom, and instructionally? Or are we guided by maybe some underlying assumptions? This activity is not usually a standalone one and is best led by somebody else, as you can see here. So having a facilitator being prepared is a great opportunity. A caution note on any sort of transformational work, as we all know, is that any change efforts sometimes cause a little disruption and disturbance in the system. So making sure that your facilitator is prepared to engage in hard questions and being comfortable as an organization, having a little bit of conflict, and even being able to say as a team, we're not quite sure yet, but we're thinking about it, and we'll continue to take steps in the future to continue to think about what this means for our organization, is a really powerful way to go about beginning to work on some transformational work. You also see some clear directions, in this case, about making some copies to be able to hand out to your group. So we've taken time to define some of these activities to really get it started so that behind the scenes, there's not a whole lot of prep in getting some of this work going. So that the majority of your time with your staff can be spent on listening to each other's thinking, and in this activity, beginning to talk about some assumptions. The activity is broken down, as you'll see in the toolkit, having a couple of options. This activity has you splitting up your staff into 2 teams, where one will draw a picture, but there's 2 separate sets of directions. One says to complete the picture, the other one is to complete it the right way. Throughout this activity with the 2 groups in the room that do not know that they had given different set of directions, you'll have an opportunity for a discussion at the end, where teams are sharing their drawings. What do you see from the most of the first group that wanted to get it right? And as you see as a variety of variation in the second group, who wasn't asked to get it right, but just asked to complete the picture. We've attached a video here from YouTube that does a demonstration and a breakdown of this activity itself, so you can see how generally it unfolds, as well as possible ideas for facilitation of the conversation. The idea behind this activity, and again, it's on a 1 to 5, it's a 5, is just to get this conversation started as a team. It's a quick icebreaker, but it does allow for people to start to have some conversations on what do we assume, and what are some of the assumptions we bring forward in everything we do. In transitioning that activity now to a local context, the same can be said for, now imagine that this image represents a school, a lesson, an assessment, maybe a schedule. Those are the types of ideas that we want to say would have a similar feel, which is, what if we were talking about school rules or credit requirements? Those types of conversations have a lot of assumptions to them. Almost everything we do. Some people think that there's a right way to design a schedule, and maybe that's associated with some assumptions about the number of minutes, the number of students in the class, or the role that the teacher plays. At the same time, being open to just saying what if, or thinking about just completing and moving ideas, begins to start to address and uncover some of these assumptions. This quick activity that we have done is now transitioning into our second activity here in the Institute Toolkit, which is uncovering assumptions, and this activity is an opportunity to go a little bit deeper into your local context. Some of those questions that we framed about schedules, some of those questions or assumptions that we might have about the role that the learner plays in school, would be a great opportunity to bring some local context into this conversation. This activity, a second one now, you can see is another 15 to 20 minute activity where it's reflection once again, enabled for a whole team. The difficulty goes up on this one, as you will see, because now we're starting to question our own practice and maybe things that are right underneath our nose in terms of how we run our school, how our classrooms are designed, and maybe our beliefs about our learners. As you can see again, if we're building momentum and how the toolkit works and is designed, this one is an opportunity to question everything, and you see what it gets your team to do, as well as some things to keep in mind as a facilitator. Rolling right along with this one, there's a handout that's created that goes with this. This handout allows for a team conversation to occur at a table where people are thinking about underlying assumptions about students and learning, as well as comparing that to what we know about students and learning. And even an opportunity to begin to think about some new assumptions for today and have an opportunity to play the what if opportunity. There's so much in schools that are based off of policy, that are written into some certain structures, routines, and traditions. Oftentimes as staff, we're finding ourselves caught into routines, and sometimes maybe our routines are based on models or assumptions that we want to start to uncover. Oftentimes, for example, that can lead to the role that the learner plays. Maybe we're noticing that there's a belief inside of a school that students need to be more compliant and committed. Maybe we're thinking about the role that the assumption that still our classes need to be taught in isolation rather than in integration. Or maybe there's an assumption that teachers should be 100% in charge of designing assessments. This is an opportunity to start to think about a project you're working on, a specific project inside of your school or your classroom or your school community, and start to get at some of the underlying assumptions of that work, with the hope and the possibility that you'd be able to move along this spectrum in this tool into a what-if mode and begin to think about what else is possible for some next steps ahead. In terms of the way that we've designed some of these toolkit pieces, as you've seen, we've just sequenced a couple of toolkits in order of sort of engaging a conversation about assumptions and moving it specifically into a local context. The toolkit itself has provided you with a framework for some of these tools and some of these handouts, but as well, as always, they're always able to be edited or customized for your local situation. Customizing things to your local situation is really thinking about it like this. Our toolkit is really a collection of a number of tools and resources, but again, it can be used together or for a particular purpose. In this case, we sequenced a couple of tools together with the purpose of starting to uncover assumptions. Keep in mind, we would also want to match that to a particular purpose inside of your local context. And again, an example could be, maybe you're starting to think about scheduling and asking yourself, why do we have 52-minute classes? What are some of the assumptions that take place in there? Why do we have teacher-designed assessments? Why do we have rules of no phones in class? Or many other problems or opportunities that we have in front of us as we're doing the work, as the work's unfolding in school. What we have found is many of the assumptions that we have are based off of a model that's been around for some time. As we were thinking about exploring new models, new roles for the learner, and most importantly, some of the new outcomes that we want for our learners to prepare them for their future, this activity itself begins the conversation. We've seen this used with parent meetings, as you're bringing forward ideas such as student-led conferences or one-to-one technology. We've seen these used in board workshops or parent workshops, staff meetings, and even alongside team and local PLC meetings. Looking for more opportunities? You can download our free toolkit again at the link that we have provided. By doing so, your name and the information that you provide us will allow us to continue to send you links for future Tools for Transformation videos. We'll be covering a number of other tools from the Institute Toolkit and videos such as this to help spur the conversation about not only what the toolkit provides and entails, but most importantly, how to use them inside of your local context. At any time, you can reach out and connect with our team here at the Institute. We'd be more than happy to help provide you and point you towards the resources that you may need, questions you may have, or help launch some of these tools into your next staff meeting or into a next community conversation. Last but not least, you can share this link with colleagues. The link that you have for the meeting here, you may know of somebody that is trying to work in the world of bringing educational transformation forward and some change. And this, as they're facing some assumptions, might be something that they're up against. And this webinar or these tools might pose as a help to them as they begin to engage their community in some of this work. At this time, I'd like to thank you for joining us for our Tools for Transformation episode tonight on uncovering assumptions. Our learner-centered design series is geared to continue to shift from the instructional paradigm to a learner-centered paradigm, one step at a time, one purpose at a time, and really with the hope of nurturing powerful learners for their future. Thank you for joining us. On behalf of all of us here at the Institute for Personalized Learning, thank you for your work in bringing forward each and every learner to their closer and closer to their future. Thank you.